You're like. Yeah, it's different. It doesn't put you like at this, yeah, and no microphone.
Yeah, like it's less intimidating, you know, to remember to listen to it, but.
You are definitely
Taking a note taking class? Oh, we're actually taking a lot of notes in note taking class.
Do you like to write?
I think it's a little bit of both.
I feel like note taking is part of like.
Well, very nice. One per day, really fast, the one.
Oh.
Again. I'm taking a family technical.
As her children are right, pretty much all of it, she's now getting the fancy. There can be stress.
Yeah. We haven't realized these are hard and we might always remember so often that it has to remain. Somehow that's good.
It looks like it's. Should be working on that, yeah, but it's not connected to the satellite. My little. I love that. I just, I love it. So, but, joy, imagination. It's fun. Magic Silver. Yeah. I'm freaking ill. Yes, right.
Sherry, you can turn the video off if you'd like. All right, well, welcome everyone. We're glad that you've joined us. We're going to call this meeting to order and we'll start with our land acknowledgement. We honor the first peoples of these lands by acknowledging that the area in which we gather is within the traditional territory of the Stillaguamish tribe of Indians. The Stillaguamish people have inhabited these lands and waters since time immemorial, and their ancestors have remained in this territory to this day. The Stillaguamish people have continued to practice the traditional ways of their ancestors of fishing, hunting, and gathering. The Stillaguamish tribe has had these lands and cultural traditions passed on to them by their ancestors who believed that everything has a spirit and that they are caretakers of these lands and waters.
Next, we'll have our Pledge of Allegiance. Will everyone please rise and join us? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Next, we'll have our roll call attendance. Director Ray.
Here. Sorry, I'm late.
There you are. Director Kelly.
Here.
Director Kingman.
Here.
President Levesque. Here. Director Knapp. Here. Student Advisor Schroeder. He's absent tonight. Student Advisor Navon. She might be coming later. Superintendent Sweeting. Here. Next up, we'll have our approval of the agenda. Is there any amendments to the agenda? Can I get a motion to approve it as presented?
I second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the agenda as presented. Madam Clerk. Director Ray.
Hi.
Director Kelly.
Aye.
Director Kingman.
Aye.
President Levesque. Aye. Director Knapp. Aye. Thank you. The agenda is approved. Next up, we'll have the best part of our meeting is our student presentation. And tonight we are honored to hear from the Stillaguamish Valley Learning Center. And we will hear from Carrie Marsh, our principal, and Amanda Andrews, teacher, and Coral Cote. Welcome.
Well, thank you for having us tonight. We have Coral here with a great presentation. I'm Carrie Marsh, by the way. We appreciate you allowing us to do this. You know, part of the writing process is to have an audience, so it's really exciting that Coral has done this great presentation and has a place to deliver it. Amanda Andrews is our second, third grade teacher, and she can introduce Coral.
Yes, so for Coral's independent research project, she chose she wanted to learn more about horses. So she did a read comparison and she chose to do that in the form of a slideshow. So she will teach you what she knows. So yeah, here's Coral, third grade.
Horse speeds by Carl Buffet. The vocabulary: hands, oranges, hay, dried grass, packing, riding for fun. To kill, patches of white and any other color. Preventing worthless competition of piece of purpose lines. Dressage, show jumping, roots rating. Half of your pony, loyal, friendly, and sassy, good for children's writing. All happeners of the same. They are just a light and tail. They're loyal and peace. They're it is a lot of things that is there. Afterwards, afterwards are short. So, afterwards are short. And they will be released. And you see how they work. And then is science game. Followers. Followers. Salt for sleep. They're holidays. They're often spotted with birds with it. They have the strongest places. They also expected. Hold on, there are lots of voices. Hold on, hold on. Patients speak about this. The main standard of the surrounding on the planet and station is second mention, the largest forces before that. Patients. Other transportations. Here, the location or location is they're not possible. So, patients are not only judgment only they are very meaningful. Barbara's were the maximum of next slide. Any questions?
Okay, do you have a horse currently?
I have two.
What are your breeds of horses, man?
Huh?
What breed are they?
There's a thoroughbreds.
So you do have a thoroughbred.
And the extra pictures on the slides were pictures of me and my horses.
Can a thoroughbred ride or run 55 miles an hour with someone on their back? too?
I'm not that sure.
Yeah, I just can't imagine being on the horse running that fast.
Yeah.
Great job.
Very nice.
Very well done. Thank you very much for coming to the school board and sharing. I learned a lot of new things. Next up, we'll have our approval of minutes. We have one set of minutes, our December 12th regular meeting minutes. Are there any amendments needed for the minute? Or do we have a motion to approve them as presented?
I make a motion for them as presented.
I'll second. It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes from December 12th, 2020. Director Ray,
Aye.
Director Kelly,
Aye.
Director Kingman.
Aye.
President Levesque. Aye. Director Knapp. Aye. Thank you. The minutes are adopted. Next, we would have our public comment portion, but we don't have anyone signed up. Is there anyone on Zoom that signed up to speak? There is no public comments tonight. All right, thank you. Next up is our consent agenda that consists of our budget enrollment reports, our personnel report, payroll report, warrants, adjusted warrants, and overnight out-of-state trip for AHS Windows level to go to Disneyland, and Everett Community College and Arlington Public School to get 99 past memorandum of understanding, and a reminder of our March for renewal date for our superintendent's contract. We have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented, or does anybody want to vote?
What was that last part?
The superintendent contract, our reminder of our March 1st renewal date.
I make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Okay.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda as presented. Madam Clerk. Director Ray,
Aye.
Director Kelly,
Aye.
Director Kingman,
Aye.
President Levesque. Aye. Director Knapp. Aye. Thank you. Next up is our new business portion of our meeting. The first thing is our financial highlights of our current budget. We'd like to welcome Gina Sutenhorst, our Executive Director of Financial Services. Welcome. Good evening.
Good evening. Getting ready to share my screen so you can see my presentation. I may be able to get through this. My heart rate is down. We'll try. So I'm here before you because November financial statements are complete, and we correspondingly have on the board agenda this item, standing agenda, for when we have our financial statements done for the month. It's always in arrears, however, so this is for the month of November. And I'll talk about some familiar things, the financial health of the district, and we start with the positives. And these are things that are good bullet topics for you as board members and community members to know about our financials and the health. So we have a healthy beginning fund balance. This helps sustain operations. We have our 4-year educational programs and operations levy. This is an essential part of our operations to have those funds. This is the 3rd year of the 4-year levy. We have federal funds and a bright star as far as federal funds go this year, because our ESSER funds are done. But our Department of Health Learn to Return funding continued this year. So we have Learn to Return funds of $404,000 this year, and that is continuing to help fund some of the very positive things that we have in our nursing stations, our health room assistants, extra time. Capital levy. This is the 3rd year of the 6-year levy that we had our voters approved, and we have all those positive things happening in the district to update and renew some of the facilities and safety and security items, as was part of the resolution they approved. levy for the capital levy.
Gina, I had a quick question while we're on this particular page. When I'm looking at this four-year educational programs and operations levy, so we're in year 3. So we're 23, 24 will be our 4th year. So if we were needing those kind of funds again, we would need to go to our constituents next year,
In
23,
February 24th.
February
Yes.
2024, right? Which is,
From this
this is in a year from now.
13 months from now.
We would need to be going, we'd have to, and we'd have to plan for that in the fall to get that ready. Okay.
We will have our, yes, sorry. 2024 is the 4th year. That levy in 2024 goes all the way through.
So that I just want to make sure we're on
Calendar
the
year.
cycle.
We are.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have it mapped out in my. mind.
Right, because I wouldn't want
I
that gap,
revisit it
right?
frequently. Yes,
Just checking.
yep, thank you. It's coming up. Okay, so that's our financial positives. Those are some really big things for us. Now, financial challenges. Yes, we have said we have a high fund balance, healthy, but we've also been doing a planned spend down of the fund balance. And this has supported programs and services through some very challenging times, but it results in declining in fund balance compared to prior years. So our budget has an estimate of an ending fund balance for 22-23 of 4.2 million. Now that is what we estimated at budget time, so that it doesn't always necessarily come to fruition quite so, because that 4.2 million assumes we spend every dime that we said we were going to, and that we get every dime that we said we were going to. No more, no less, no more, no less. And in real life, we know that we often don't actually end up spending every dime of what we had planned. And oftentimes we end up with a lot of fluctuation in the various revenue sources that we receive. So I'm just putting that caveat in there because you'll hear me say 4.2 million all along, but there are caveats. Another challenge is that our enrollment is recovering more slowly than hoped. We have, although we have more students than we did last year, we have been trying to make those projections and plan for that to kind of recover slowly from what we lost during the pandemic. And we have not had them come back as quickly as we might have hoped. We have about 55 students at full-time equivalent students less than budgeted for a 22-23 fiscal year. So that is going to result in about 550,000 less in our state apportionment than we had budgeted for. We're not going to actually see or feel the pinch of that until we get a rebalance of our apportionment statement. And that happens in January because the very start of the year, September through December, the state pays us according to our budgeted enrollment. And in January, they adjust to your actual average student enrollment. So.
Other quick question, Gina, but that's 55 FTE that we're shy. Do you know if those numbers are at the front end or the back end? Like, are we missing folks coming in at the kindergarten level, or is there attrition, maybe kids that have not recovered, not come back from high school?
The biggest change I would attribute is to the kindergarten.
Okay.
The kindergartners did not come in at what we would have expected them to come in at.
And this is already a town that's growing and housing and so forth. and we
Yeah.
Still did it.
It's quite an anomaly, and it's not unique to our district. There are many districts where the kindergarten age students that would have been projected did not come. And so there's theories out there as to whether or not there's some kiddos that are being kept at home and maybe provided with schooling at home, and maybe we'll see them in first grade, or maybe some of the would-be kindergartners this year we'll see as kindergartners next year. So it remains to be seen. It's a real wondering
Okay,
on our part as well.
so running our numbers, we should have expected that, and it just didn't. did manifest.
Our federal relief funds, so ESSER, mostly ESSER, but also in our food nutrition services last year, we were able to provide food, meals at no charge for all students. So that program is done, and we have spent all our ESSER funds. So those funds have been exhausted.
Hi,
Hi,
were we required to have spent all the ESSER funds last year? Or could we have carried them?
we could have carried them forward. There's a longer deadline under which you have to spend them. But different districts chose to do different things with their funds. So some of them have not spent all of their funds. Our district chose to utilize those funds. We felt that that sent the message as to that those were very needed and necessary. And if they give you those funds and you are not a steward of spending them, although different districts have different reasons and explanations as to what they did. But for us, that would have sent the message as if we did not need those funds. And we definitely were of a need with everything happening during the pandemic. We needed the staff that we had, extra staff. And we needed more staff than we had planned to have to deal with everything.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. Certain programs have very unique needs, and they have the revenues that we receive for the special education program as the main example. The revenues that we receive are not keeping up with the demands of the expenditures that we need to provide those programs with the fidelity that we need and want to provide those programs at. By law, those needs need to be met, and the district does what we need to do in order to do that. But it is definitely an indicator to the state and to any who would look that the state is not adequately funding special education. And that is a primary focus of any many advocacy groups that are speaking to the state legislature. And we're continuing to recover from the impacts of the pandemic in many areas and operations, student behavior, just everything that we're still adjusting and transitioning out of the pandemic. But there are some things that will remain with us forevermore in the new operations pre-post pandemic. So we're preparing for future reductions to be enacted in 23-24.
Funding or staffing? What reductions?
In our spending,
And you have this task force?
we have a task force, a budgetary task force that is being communicated with, and we're expanding that circle of communication
Okay.
as our communication strategy around that. And I've said this, it's almost likened to the efforts that we put out to communicate when we are talking about the need for our levy. And I hate to put those two together, but it's an equal need to be communicating with our public and with our parents and with our staff. So working on that. So for current month, and coming back to November, the beginning fund balance that we started the year with was 10.1 million. And our fund balance as of November is 7.1 million. And we can see the multiple years lined up against each other on this chart. Where the navy blue one down here at the bottom, the darkest line, in November, this is where we're at this 7.1 million. And you can see it's following the trend. It'll bounce around just like it will from month to month, depending on the revenues and expenditures. The highest months being October and April as the months where our local levy property tax revenues are collected. That's the primary reason that will bump up that month. Otherwise, our monthly expenditures stay pretty consistent from month to month. So that's why you'll see that bounce around, and it's following the trend of where it would normally be at this time of year without any kind of significant deviation, other than that the trend is lower than it has been in previous years. As we've talked about, we've planned to spend down because we have carried a balance over what our minimum reserves would require of us. And now we're spending into that. Here is OSPI Financial Indicators tool. This is a tool that's put out by OSPI. And we continue to just take a peek at this as an indicator for our future and to keep an eye on this. It is a big picture tool. The years on the left side of the chart are published by OSPI. And these are the scores that were generated by our numbers, our total revenues, our total expenditures, our fund balance, our days of cash on hand. All of those factors generate these weighted scores. And you can see that we have been very healthy across the years, staying in the above 3 points. But in 21-22, we're starting to see the evidence of coming down. And I have extrapolated this budgeted estimated column for 22-23. And this is based on just a rough picture, plugging in budgeted numbers that were approved by the board during the August process. And it does show generating 1.5, which is significantly lower than we've had in the past. If you are below 1.75 when you end your fiscal year, and when they actually do these measurements and publish them, you would be considered to be on financial watch. I don't anticipate that we're actually going to be there. The district will likely be more in the 1.75 to 1.9 range, but we're having to take actions to follow that through and see that happens by reducing some of our spending and really monitoring in that area.
Okay, so it's based on expected reductions in spending.
The coming in the higher range.
Right.
Yes, yeah.
Do you have any idea what that might look like yet?
I think we'll be at
I
1.75.
mean, in terms of where the reduction in spending occurs?
We have some idea of where that has happened. But also part of it is just not spending every dime that we budgeted. Like, so I estimated it was going to cost 500,000 for something and it cost 495,000. That we didn't actually spend less than we planned, it just cost us less. So those savings as well would bring us back into a better picture. Those kind of, we didn't spend it all.
And we have positions that we haven't hired yet, or we have some special ed positions, unfortunately, but fortunately, I mean, it's the double-edged sword, is that they have not been hired, so.
So I just want to orient us also for the 4-year forecast. This is the chart that we looked at as a board and as a community at the August 8th budget presentation. And it does show that in the out years, we would need to reduce to stay solvent. And it would still have us with a minimum fund balance that would be less than the minimum would require of us. Then looking at that up against what are our minimum fund balance requirements.
Can you explain exactly what it means to be insolvent? Does that mean that we have spent all of our minimum fund balance and we're at zero? Or is it like a number? So I know there's a neighboring district of ours that's talking about if they don't pass the levy, that they will become insolvent. I just want to know, what is the definition of insolvent?
That's a good question. I've not actually had to totally articulate it quite, but I would say, let me give this a try, that they perhaps are budgeted to be in a negative fund balance.
Where they owe people and they can't pay them.
Correct.
That would be really awkward.
And that's probably in the out years, because if they were budgeted to actually be in the negative fund balance for any given year, they would be, I mean, in any given current year, they would be put on binding conditions from OSPI. Which
Well, that
then they
sounds
get
fun.
involved in.
Let's avoid that.
Yeah.
Okay.
This chart again was.
Can I interrupt? You guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
Awesome, thanks. So just, so insolvent, I mean, just so we're all clear, I mean, my understanding is we would be unable to pay our debts. So are you using that word in that meaning that we would, not that we are, not that we're there, but that would be the projection that could happen, that we would be unable to pay any debts that we owe, which would mean things like payroll. Is that correct?
That's another way to say it, yes,
Okay, thank you.
yeah. Thanks. Okay, so this chart is again also what was looked at in the August meeting. And it just basically is showing then with those projections, they're big picture, they are not exact. But that is where we would be under our minimum fund balance, what our minimum fund balance would require of us according to board policy. So we wouldn't be in negative fund balance, we would just have less fund balance than we would under normal circumstances plan. So I put that up there just because I'm also wanted to talk a little bit more about minimum fund balance policy and kind of how that changes the picture of what we are looking at. If we also consider, and I'm not necessarily recommending that we do this, I'm just putting these numbers before us so that we can be aware of the differences between one or the other and what that does with our forecast picture. So the board policy requires minimum fund balance equal to 1 month's average operating costs, but it allows flexibility in times of emergency. So for us, that was how we determined that we would choose to go into using some of that flexibility with the emergency of the pandemic. And it not just being a quick emergency, it's a long emergency and responding to that emergency. So contemplating a change to board policy from 1 month's average operating cost, which is roughly 8%. We might contemplate changing to a fund balance policy of 5% of operating expenditures. And if we did so, it would generate the numbers in the range of 4.8 million rather than a range of 7.9 or 8 million of a reserve.
Can I ask a question about minimum fund balance?
Sure.
Are you able to ask other neighboring districts what their minimum fund balance policies are and their practices? And are we about the same with our 1 month, or do other districts do like 5%, 10%, 2 months?
I would say that there's lots of different things that are going on outside of us. And yes, I do speak with and query frequently. I hear that query comes out often. Sometimes from myself, sometimes from neighboring districts, and it'll ask the group, tell me again what everybody's policy is, who's doing what. But most of us are not too far off from each other. There are some that are in the average operating cost like us. That does generate a higher amount. There's some that are at a 5%. That's a pretty common. There's some that are in a 5 to 10%, a range of 5 to 10%. So it varies, but I think that below 5% is quite meager. And there are not many who would choose to be in the below 5%.
So that 8 to 5% feels like a big jump to me, like the 3% difference there. I think I was wondering, did you come up with the 5% because it was closer to what our needs are gonna be projected?
I think I chose that because I knew that that was another common line where people were at. And me personally, I think that we might consider temporarily going to a 5% with the goal of coming back to 8%, but or 6 to 8%. But if we have a policy about something, then we want to honor that policy. So that's why we're talking about it in this manner, not just being under our policy.
Yeah, that was my other question, is what time frame, like, can we 5% for a year and then see how that goes, or do we need to commit to 4 years or?
I think we can make adjustments.
That's why I think some districts like Lakewood have a range, theirs is 5 to 10,
Oh, okay.
Or they'll use language like a target.
So we're not considering or contemplating changing the policy just to pay our bills. We're doing that to avoid most PI's watch list.
No, we are, I believe that if we left our fund balance policy at what it was, then our future year reductions would be even greater. And we would have less time to make those adjustments in a more
There's another hand up.
smoother fashion. Hi. Question from,
Mike, the other Mike.
So,
okay,
two-parter. First part, since we're talking about this ending fund balance, it certainly feels like we are adjusting a policy to meet our needs in an era of financial instability. And that strikes me as not something that I really want to support. I'm happy to consider fund balance numbers in times where we're more solvent or it makes sense. It certainly feels like that, and agreed that, I mean, we're just not meeting our policy, which, you know, we're in trouble with ourselves, kind of. I mean, there's no other really ramifications for that. So, I mean, that's just how I feel about it. I mean, I understand that we adjust policies to meet our needs all the time. This seems like kind of a larger area in which to do that, that it just seems like it could potentially, I don't have great words for it, but just the appearance of it isn't the best. And it doesn't seem like that's something that I would want to support. I'm happy to talk about, you know, generally accepted accounting principles and what might be a better standard for us to adopt. If there was some hard data there, but it sounds like it's kind of across the board, of course, whatever each potential district wants to do. Anyways, that's my comments on that. And then if you don't mind indulging me for a quick question. So Gina, you had a slide up a moment ago that wasn't the one that I'm seeing now that says potential forecast, but it was very similar looking. And I don't know if you could maybe put those side by side, or if you can't put them side by side, what the differences between those are.
okay, so this is the old one. And what is changing is I'm sorry, I can't put them by each other too easily right now, but I'll go back and forth.
That's okay. I can see now, this one's August 8th and the other one was August or November
Yes.
28th or whatever. Understood. That's really
And-
what I was looking at. Thank you.
They're broad level, so it's not a super duper accurate recalculation of all of the figures, but it was more of a what if, what does this do to the picture? And so I adjusted to what I might be a more reasonable, proper ending fund balance. So instead of 4.21 in 22-23, we said, well, what does the picture look like if we are ending actually at 6 million? We left our revenues the same. And we looked at our expenditures once again, and I did rough those out a little bit differently. They are more than the other one. So it was 95.5.
Mhm.
And now it's 97. And that's just roughing out the numbers, looking at IPD potentials and what I know to be currently bargained agreements. And so that came to a higher dollar amount. And then that's also still assuming that we've reduced by 4.9 million to get that figure.
Right. Understood. Thank you. Yeah,
And
I just didn't, I had missed I mean, honestly, the print's pretty small on my end of the dates of what those were. And I was like, what was the difference?
Yeah, it's really, really small. Yeah, and I do that, it's a little bit, lots to look at, but I do that if you're following, well, what did it used to be in the budget? What numbers are these? What changed? To at least give you, that reference in the materials.
No, I absolutely, no, I think it's great, totally appreciate it. It's good. Well, I don't like the numbers, but I like the way you present the numbers.
Good. We'll keep working on that. So there are some little not cheat sheet, but notes at the bottom that says, what did I change? So that assumes a beginning fund balance that we had plus 2 million. And it assumes salary reductions of 4.95. And I say salary, but it wouldn't all be salary, it's gonna be in different places. And then it also assumed IPD of 2.5, which I'll talk a little bit more about that, but it's highly likely that it will be more than 2.5. And then a 3% that was per bargaining. And in future years, these numbers are using a 2% IPD. And it's just, you really just don't know exactly what they're gonna do, how that is gonna play out. So we'll be needing to continue to adjust those and look at scenarios.
Tina, I'm just curious. You know, how you had the different percentages, 5% and 8% or 1 month. Could you also show us what it would look like at 6% or 7%? And just kind of in between,
Which part?
the one where you talked about changing the policy from.
Yeah, next time I'll do that.
That would be kind of interesting to see what that looks like too.
That would be quite easy to do and I'll do that.
You know, I've heard kind of through the grapevine, they were looking at, and I don't know where this would come from, if it's an OSPI thing or teachers union or something, but my understanding was a potential increase in pay. I'm not sure if it was just certificated and classified. So I'm wondering, you know, is it both? So if that was a target and that would go to the legislature, who's gonna fund that?
So
Because I'm looking at these numbers and I'm just like, you're talking about possible, you know, staff reduction. I'm like, but we're talking about
yeah.
having to cough up more money for the staff, so.
So are you talking about the idea around the average salary that the state provides in their prototypical school model?
Maybe, I don't know.
They're talking
I got it specified that to that level.
Yeah.
But just in the grapevine, you hear, they're looking at keeping pace with inflation, like I know the,
Oh,
I think the state police or someone just, they got the 10, I would say 10%. Here, all these sorts of numbers, and I just didn't know if that was the case, if the legislature said yes to that, where would that money come from?
It depends. Yeah, so because there's part of, if the state does certain things with their calculations and puts it in, it depends on how they flow that through to us, because we have certain requirements in how we pay our staff as well. So, and they don't give us dollar for dollar. They might obligate, it's unfunded mandates, I guess. In the way that it rolls out, that's one quick way, I guess.
So there's a potential that you could be mandated to provide this, but not given, it's like for 80 cents for every dollar that. Yeah. That's. Thanks.
That's why it's a little dangerous when we're talking about those percentages. We're grateful that for any additional funds, but how that translates into how we have to pay it out can be difficult, can create more challenges.
Yep.
And it's based on an average. So for a classified staff, or certificated staff, and administrator, there's a set average salary, so that you know, if they're gonna.
So the district has some flexibility.
But not all of our people are at this average, so right away, you're not gonna have the funding for the people that
So
are.
if you're at the upper echelon, you reach this certain.
They're not state funded employees, so anybody that's not a state funded employee, then they're not from that.
Lots of nuances. Thank you.
Okay, so this chart just lays up where we've had our anticipated ending fund balances coming in at, and how those would look if we were doing a
5% target minimum fund balance, and how close we are then to maintaining our minimum, what our minimum would be. Now, if we have a targeted minimum fund balance is a little higher, we're probably gonna have to make bigger adjustments to get there. And that's what we that's what we're continuing to look at. Looking to the future, uncertainties, we've been already kind of talking about this, and I apologize for the small print because it was just my notes mostly that I wanted to be able to have in front of me if anybody was asking. That this is kind of what the legislators in the governor's budget. The governor's budget just recently came out, so it's his proposal as they're heading into their legislative session, which just started. And there will be many variations of this as House and Senate within the legislative process works out their various things. But the governor's recently proposed budget proposal was not very robust towards K-12 education. And it appeared it was only what was already agreed to in previous legislative sessions. So they call those maintenance increases. What have we already agreed that we have to increase schools by? And it supports a forecasted IPD of 2.6 for 23-24 and 2% for 24-25. Now that is not anywhere at all authoritative at all. And it doesn't, that's much lower than probably anything else that we're gonna see coming out. So the maintenance level budget dollars, but he also provided an additional amount separate from that to fund inflation at 4.5% next year and 2% in the year after that, on top of those little, the ones before that I talked about. That's all over the board. So I'm just gonna keep tracking on what comes out each week for what they're talking about doing. The most recent quarterly report, the November 2022 from the Economic and Revenue Forecast Council, which is where the actual IPD comes from, projected IPD, it was 5.2 for 2023 and 2.6 in 2024. So, shall I continue on, or do you want to just read these bullets? I'm sorry. Okay. Yeah, so you get the idea that they're just really fluctuating, and there's debate about switching from IPD to CPI and what that would do depending on which one is higher or lower in which years. So, and it just makes for lots of fluctuating uncertainties continuing. So, final slide before we can still talk, well, not this final slide, but plans for reducing costs throughout 22-23. We've talked about these things that we're doing now to help our financial picture, and then the work that we're doing for developing our reduced educational programs and services picture for 23-24. And we are working with the budget advisory task force meetings, providing information to them so that they have a basic idea of what school finance is about, and then talking through some of the challenges that we're facing. We have budget forum meetings that are open to the public as well coming up. The first one is January at the Burns Performing Arts Center. I can't remember the date. I think it's the 24th. And then there's a legislative session that will be concluding on April 23. But the challenge is that our board will have to take action on potential reduction. It would have to occur by the April 24 board meeting or by the May 8 board meeting. And that is to meet our contractual obligations for notifying our staff. And so it's not congruent with having good, strong data to make those decisions on. So we will have to make preemptive decisions to some extent. And then if the picture changes, is more positive, we can bring people, bring things down. What could change the picture? We've talked about that. Just really the outcome of careful spending in 22-23 for now as the most immediate changing of the picture. And then what the legislature chooses to do. We have enrollment uncertainty as well, and we'll hear next on the next agenda item for this board meeting, more about that. But we're staying tuned. If they're gonna increase special education program funding, I'm just gonna still remain hopeful and be involved in advocacy for that. Increases to the prototypical school model would help, changes to compensation funding model would help. And I'm to the end of my presentation, so. Thank you for listening, and if you have any additional questions.
Thank you.
Thank you for keeping us informed on the crazy moving target that is our budget.
Thank you.
Gina, next up on our agenda is our 2023 to 24 student enrollment review, and this will be presented by Brian Lewis, our Executive Director of Curriculum. Welcome, Brian. Good evening.
Thank you. Good evening, directors. Just taking a moment here to get the slideshow set up. I'm also gonna ask a favor of you all. If I could turn that fan off.
I'm going to turn it off. This is-
Okay,
Great idea.
thank you.
We're not like a keyboard.
Yeah, there's an off button over there, Chris.
You should reach it.
I can reach it.
Thanks, Mike, to it. Yeah, no.
It's not supposed to be pulled in. It is pulled.
Oh.
It's like it's blowing air on them.
Okay, thank you.
I didn't hear a thing Gina said.
Echo that comment. Difficult to hear. So good evening, directors. I'm here to talk tonight about enrollment projection for the 23-24 school year. And just to give you some background on the process that we follow, we generally present a preview in February, the first meeting in February, and then bring to you a final recommendation at the second meeting in February. We're accelerating the process a little bit this year, doing it a month early, so we've got plenty of time to handle the downstream planning that may come about from an enrollment projection. So I'm going to talk a little bit about definitions. This, if you've seen this presentation in the past, it's substantially the same, with the exception of the numbers that we're presenting for an enrollment projection for the next year. I'm going to hit on topics that we've discussed before, and I've got some additional sources to elaborate on the points that I'm hoping to make tonight. We measure students in a variety of ways in terms of enrollment. The first measurement that we use is full-time equivalent. And then from that, the average annual full-time equivalent. And a full-time equivalent student is a student that attends this minimum amount of time per year, 5 hours and 33 minutes for each scheduled school day, unless we've got variations in the school day, like an early release, but we take those things into account when we're planning the calendar for the next school year, how many hours of seat time that the students will be present or have the opportunity to be present. And then across that 10-month period, their presence in the school is averaged, and we report it to OSPI every month. And then they do the averaging for us. And based on that average, they adjust our apportionment revenues or other forms of state support, as Gina was referring to earlier. They make changes based on that enrollment across the year. So we've been operating on budgeted enrollment from the apportionment point of view until January of this year, when the actual enrollment numbers are used to determine our final allocation of state apportionment funds. So the annual average FTE is just the full-time equivalency measurement of a student's presence in our school across the 10-month period from September to June of each year. That's one way of measuring it. Head count is a different way of measuring it. And you're going to see a reference to head count here in just a few moments as well. And head count is, there's no way to physically divide a body. It's a body is a body is a body, and it represents the physical presence of a person regardless of the amount of time they spend with us throughout the school day. So we could have a senior who's enrolled in a skill center program, who's for half of their day, and then the other half of the day, they're with us. So for purposes of measuring full-time equivalency, they would count as 0.5 FTE, but for purposes of counting head count, they would count for a 1.1 FTE. Can't put a 0.0 on that. It's just a 1. So there's different programs that the state provides apportionment for to us. Some are based on head count, some are based on full-time equivalency. The remainder of this discussion is really going to focus on full-time equivalency and how that drives apportionment. So in addition to enrollment, there are other factors that have an influence on enrollment and in projecting our enrollment into the future. That includes births, how many children are born within a zip code, within the Arlington zip code in particular. Transitions, I'll talk in more detail about that, but transitions is used in the weighted average method of calculating enrollment. And what it does is it takes into account changes in the following year due to circumstances that may occur. For example, generally we see an increase between kindergarten and first grade because kindergarten is not a required attendance program. In fact, students are not required to attend until they're age 8 in Washington State. And at that point, the families are required to either register their student in an institution like a public school or acquire or submit a declaration of intent to homeschool. So not everybody sends their kids to kindergarten, and not everybody that shows up for first grade has been in kindergarten. So there's generally an increase between kindergarten and first grade. Same thing happens with 8th grade and 9th grade. There's generally an increase between 8th grade and 9th grade. That's due to a lot of private institutions ending in 8th grade or families making a decision to send a previously homeschooled student to public school at the high school level for either the whole day or part of the day, because there's programs that they can't access through their homeschool practice that they can get at a public school. Construction is another big one. You heard somebody reference the amount of construction occurring in the area that does have an influence on the number of kids enrolled in our schools. Mobility, some areas more mobile than others. Prior to the pandemic, Arlington was experiencing a lot of in-migration, and that has slowed significantly. Withdrawal from school, again, what we're seeing is a change in enrollment patterns. Families that have previously enrolled their students in our schools have withdrawn them from school, and they've moved to other states, or they've got a homeschool program going on, or they've made another decision about their students' education. So that we have seen that happen as well. And then pandemic obviously has made a big impact on our enrollment. This chart shows the number of births per year in the zip code, the 98223 zip code. And what we generally see is that 5 years after a student is born, a child is born, they enroll in a public school in kindergarten. Now, up until this year, what we had seen was that the relationship between the number of births and subsequent enrollment 5 years later in our kindergarten program was 83.2%, 83.3%. And that was pretty rock solid. And we measured it back 25 years, and that was the relationship that we saw. We experienced a seismic shift this year, and that seismic shift is a reduction in that enrollment percentage from the time a child is born before they enroll in kindergarten, went down to 71%. And we fully expect that that's going to continue into 23-24. What the side effect of that is that the transition that we would normally see between K and 1 is also affected. Fewer kids in K translates into fewer kids in first grade. That's what we're assuming for our recommendation for the 23-24 enrollment, is that we'll see fewer first graders due to the lack of their presence in kindergarten. So I'm gonna stop my screen share for a moment, or at least you guys see that? No. I'm gonna stop my share and share my screen again. These weren't included in your packet. Apologies. I would ask that I did find a mistake in the presentation. I'm going to ask Superintendent and Debbie to republish that tonight. I can include these in the packet as well. So this is from a
Brian, can
Yes.
make it a little bit bigger on your screen?
yes.
So that
This-
we Make it visible on our.
Can you see that now?
Those better, thank you.
Okay, this is from a publication called The Center Square. And the title of this is Washington Expects Lower K-12 Enrollment and Rising Costs Through 2025. I'm just going to read a brief snippet for you. So, and I'm going to start right here, but school enrollment is not expected to return to pre-COVID-19 levels for at least the next several years. According to this is June 2022, forecast numbers, enrollment for the 24-25, which is not next year, but the year following, is forecast to be 1,037,000, which is below the 2016-17 school year enrollment of 1,079,000. In 2021, common school enrollment declined year over year by 3.7% due to concerns about COVID-19 and remote hybrid schooling in the forecast state. This is referring to the State Forecast Council and publication that they've made, which they do on a regular basis, forecasting caseloads. Some families opted for home-based instruction, private school instruction, or delayed their child's enrollment in kindergarten. Additional families may have located out of state. Finally, immigrants moving into Washington state significantly dropped. And they're not talking about immigrants from another country, they're talking about immigrants from anywhere moving into Washington state. And the Seattle Times published on December 28th that Washington experienced its first net, and I know the word out migration in 2022, 6,300 people. That's not a whole lot of people considering the state's population is about 8 or 9 million people. But what is significant in that is people leaving the state, more people leaving the state than coming in. So in 21-22, total enrollment remained flat. Kindergarten and first grade public school enrollment rates improved from those of the prior year, though not to pre-pandemic rates. So this is what we're experiencing right now. We didn't really see it in 21-22 because we were still living with enrollment stabilization funding, which provided us a cushion. It looked at the 2019 enrollment prior to COVID and paid our portion based on that. Okay. Let me show you another slide here. So this is from, this is head count, and this is from a demographic study that we had commissioned prior to really feeling the impact of COVID. And I want to point out the bottom line here. This is head count. So in 2016-17, we had 5,406 total students in the district. That number kept rising and rising and rising. And we were on our way to 5,800 kids in 2019-20. But when the COVID struck in March of 2020, you can see the immediate result was a decline of about 500 kids. And we recovered somewhat in 21-22, covered a little bit more in 22-23 this year. Our head count is 5,425. So we do expect a slow growth but weakness in terms of enrollment in specific grades, and those grades are K and 1. Now, if you think about what happens over time, if that enrollment stays low, decrease by 10% from 80% to 70%, and that trend continues, then over time, the overall enrollment of the district will decline, unless we've got more people moving into the area, which the apartments that are under construction will accommodate that kind of population growth. So there is a potential, but over the next year or 2 years, we're not planning on that. We're planning on decline in enrollment, and you'll see that the recommendation that we've got for the 23-24 enrollment is reflecting that. That's that small decline.
Great, another question too.
Yes, ma'am.
I know we offer a pretty robust homeschooling option. Would that be something we should go deeper into and look at capturing those families that want to pursue that with bigger, go deeper? And I mean, we already have a bricks and mortar, we have something, and we have an existing program, and we know that it's been growing. I don't remember the numbers that Jane may have presented already, but that would be my thing, because I think, I want to say something with Spokane, they actually have like Spokane Virtual Academy or something. And to me, that would be a nice way to complement maybe where we see a trend going. And it's something to me that we have existing, could go up and then pull back as needed if that starts shifting where they come into the school, where families go back to schools again. But I don't know, I'm just throwing it out there if that's something, I'm sure you've considered it, but that would be something I would want to go a little deeper into of how can we grow that more?
Well, that's why we did expand and went to K-12
Yes,
for our online program, which
Right.
has doubled
Right.
since then.
there we go.
So that was a piece of that, and like the Spokane Virtual Academy is, our online is very similar, but theirs is a little bit different, but they have teachers to for their own curriculum that they use and content, and they do that, but one of the things that we talked about, and we're still just exploring it, would be a transitional kindergarten program,
Right.
which is a year before that they're going to kindergarten.
Mhm.
And so we're just exploring that right now, that concept. There's just conversation about what does that mean? What does that look like? And making sure that, we have space for that.
I find in my own experience as a kindergarten teacher that I find that the continuity really comes in. I have several students who have shared daycare together. And so those families, like then they just go on seamlessly into kindergarten and then we move on. So to me, if you can kind of capture that market where, like you said, a transitional, where you're doing that, providing that service and that education environment, and then it becomes a natural transition to being a part of public school. Yeah, I think that would be great. So.
I have a question too, so to piggyback off of that, kind of, SBLC has mixed grade classrooms. So I don't know if this is a Brian question or a Chris question, but is there any thoughts around that, or like at what point would that be considered in the primary grades? Maybe not K1, but
Like, so not, it's not age. or-
it would be, yeah, well, because SBLC has, second, third together and fourth and fifth in the same classroom. So, for one teacher.
Right, and sometimes that's, and that, I would assume that, like, I know people, we do that intentionally, because if the agreement is for kids to be, integrated together but if we grew in numbers, it still would need to be aligned with what the level is of the students. So we have a lot more to explore there too, of course. Having more opportunities, more options is important, but it also costs money to do those things as well.
Okay. I'm gonna skip this slide. I talked about transitions already with you. I want to talk about the 3 different methodologies that we use to project enrollment. First one is really the most simple, and it's called the April enrollment or April roll-up. And what this does is it takes what we think are going to be the number of students in our classrooms in April of year one, and that those same students will be with us in the next year, one grade level up. So in this situation, we've had to project what we think will be here in terms of student enrollment in April of this year, and then roll those students forward into the next grade. Now, this is, it's easy to understand. What it doesn't do is it doesn't take into account transitions that occur. And I mentioned here grades K1 and 8 through 9, but there are transitions that occur throughout the system. It just might not be as easily discerned as the ones between K1 and 8 through 9. Weighted historical average, what this methodology does is it looks, it's similar to the April roll-up, but it incorporates transitions. What happens between K1 and 8 through 9. And it also takes into account to some degree the experience that we've had in the past in terms of the number of students that fluctuate throughout the year. For example, the 3 levels, elementary, middle, and high have very distinct patterns, where in elementary grades, we tend to grow slightly throughout the year. Middle school tends to remain fairly flat, and high school tends to decline somewhat, especially in 11th and 12th grade after the first semester is completed. That's where we see big changes happen. So the historical average takes those changes into account, whereas the April roll-up does not.
Brian, does that include, like we had, someone sent us an email about the 6th grade and the transition from 5th to 6th grade?
Yes, it does. So, and that's not one that I've calculated, that 5th and 6th grade transition, but it is taken into consideration by the mathematical formula that we use to carry kids forward into the next year. And then OSPI cohort survival. This is a more statistically driven calculation that we get from OSPI. They have not yet updated their cohort survival projection for next year. They go out 5 years with each of their projections. So you'll see the 23-24 cohort survival projection in the comparative table here. But it is from last year. They did not take into account, or they have not calculated new cohort survival. But generally, we don't use cohort survival because it tends to magnify changes in enrollment to the degree that it's not really reliable for us. It can amplify small changes to the degree that it's not really sound to make decisions on those changes. It's very volatile. So you'll see here the 2 considerations that we use when we're examining the enrollment projections is volatility and conservativeness. And a volatile enrollment projection, which we see with the OSPI cohort survival method, it changes quickly, and to non-statistical minded people, it's unpredictable. So it can make a small change really big in the following years. Don't want to try to avoid using that. A conservative estimate is it's kind of like the Goldilocks estimate, not too hot, not too cold, just right, and it doesn't amplify swings one way or the other, and we don't overestimate what our enrollment's going to be, but we also don't underestimate what it's going to be. And if you wanted to look at it in a graphical way, the April roll-up is the most conservative nature of all the methodologies. Cohort survival is the most volatile, and the weighted historical average is generally just right. We're seeing something different in this year. So along with the seismic shift we've seen in K enrollments, our recommendation is going to be to use the April roll-up methodology rather than the cohort survival or the weighted historical average. In the past, I've recommended weighted historical average, but this year, because of what we've seen happen in K-1, we're recommending the April roll-up. I'm going to skip through this chart because you've got it in your packets, but I wanted to spend a couple of moments here and talk about the different methodologies you can see represented up there, 23-24 April roll-up, weighted average, and cohort survival. And then each one of those columns has a comparison to the 22-23 budget. And you can see that in the April roll-up, what we're anticipating in this year, we're looking at a variance in the first grade from budget of 0.37. But when we compare next year, we're seeing a variance from the current year of 57 FTE in the first grade. So that's taking into account the kids that aren't with us in K this year, assuming they're not going to be showing up in first grade of next year. And you can see the 70 in brackets above that is the kindergarten, the difference from forecast or from budget from 22-23. Again, this is taking into consideration that live birth number I showed you earlier, but instead of multiplied by 84%, which is what our prior experience was, we're multiplying that by 70%, 71% to arrive at a lower number for enrollment. So we may see a change in 24-25, but right now, this is what our recommendation is in the median range, and it does reflect a drop in budgeted enrollment from the current year by about 127 kids.
And really, that's reflected, if you look at it, it's really reflected in K and first grade. So you're taking, if the enrollment for kindergarten stays what it was this year, and you're taking that into account, and then the less, the number that we have, less this year, you take that into account for first grade. So you look at the 70 and the 57.86, and that's pretty close.
So what we plan on presenting to you at the next meeting is a building comparison as well. So you can see what we think is going to happen at each building and by grade level. Yes, ma'am.
Can you add a column to each of those, or just somewhere on that page that says what our actual enrollment is?
For this year?
Our counts, yeah.
It's right there. The 22-23 projected annual average FTE. That's
the same numbers that we have this year.
That's the actual enrollment for this year.
That's not moving everybody up 1 year.
No,
That's right now.
So right now, the kindergartner number is 336.48.
correct.
Okay. Well, then never mind. Request granted.
It's there.
Question for you or Dr. Sweeting. So if we have parents who have a kindergartner and they could come to the school and they're not coming to school, do we know if they are in fact using our home school?
Well, first of all, we wouldn't know, because there's no way we wouldn't, if it's kindergarten.
So, okay, if we know that, yeah, so we know we have a general idea of the population. This is about how many should be kindergarten. So we have that number. So what I'm asking is, are we attractive enough for those parents that are looking at homeschool to only consider Arlington? Number one. Number two, when I lived on Whitby, I didn't use any homeschool that was within Langley. I was using Meridian. I was using Columbia Virtual Academy halfway across the state. So not to be blunt, but I mean, we could be making ourselves attractive enough that others came to Arlington's homeschool.
And I will say that Mr. Sable is working on a video.
I know we talked about this.
Yeah, the video, it's really like an advertisement, but the focus is, why is it important to go to kindergarten? And then we would highlight what we do here in Arlington. What does it look like? What does it sound like? What do the teachers say about it? What do the parents say about it? What do the kids say about it? And so we're looking, Gary's working on that.
I just don't know what our neighboring districts offer in terms of homeschool. I don't know that data. I don't know that Lakewood offers anything, Helen Marysville offers, but I'm saying that it's a way to capture some numbers. And as I said, if you're here and you're looking at Spokane Virtual Academy, you don't need to look at Spokane because we've got a great resource right here in your neck of the woods. Thanks.
And we could do another, I mean, this is nothing on Mr. Davis' plate, but, you know, just about, you know, Arlington Online Program, the SBLC, what does that look like? You know, do a little bit of advertisement there too, as well.
Something about how we can support homeschooling families and lots of different varieties.
With that, the homeschool options and just the virtual options, is there any way that like, do students get a say, like to present how they feel about it at all? Like, if not now, could there be a way that students could say, this is how I feel about online, like, these are the pros, these are the cons, and say why they would choose it, why they wouldn't? I think that would help benefit, like, why parents should choose Arlington, if
Yeah,
that's
and
what
why-
want to advertise Arlington more.
And there's a certain kind of student, I've read this as well, and I have my kids as well, but like, what, like, just looking at both sides of that, and the student would say, wow, that really fits my personality type.
Exactly.
I will soar in that environment versus being in a high school building, that might be a very different, right? To each his own, but yes, I think having student voices is absolutely, yeah, that's a big part of it for sure.
Okay. Any further questions? Thank you. We'll see you next meeting.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you for your very astute analysis of the crystal ball that goes along with the moving target that Gina presented.
And also thank you to, I also thank Brian as well for giving us not the Goldilocks, but really going more conservative, because I think that's what it calls for this year. And possibly in the future.
Okay, next up on our agenda is our informational items, and we will start with our superintendent's report.
Well, my first thing was happy new year to everybody, first board meeting of the new year. I also was going to wish Kyle, one of our student advisors, publicly a happy birthday. Yeah, but happy birthday, Kyle. I wanted to share that this week on Thursday, we are, it's going to be really wonderful. We have Erin Jones coming back into the district. She's going to do a assembly at both high schools, so that'd be great. And then we also, I was informed today by Mr. Lewis that we have 4D. These are the larger buses, the bigger buses that have been ordered. New buses, 4D buses. That because planning, it's less than what we originally had set forth, but we're still taking steps forward to order the buses. And my last thing is that January is proclaimed to be School Board Recognition Month and Appreciation Month. So thank you to each of you for all that you do, and we will keep celebrating and honoring you the rest of the month.
That's it. Thank you. Next up, we'll have our legislative update by Director Kelly.
Today's a big day if you're in Olympia. Yay, finally. Couple things, my husband sent me this article, he subscribes to Everett Herald, and this was a very good, I don't know if anyone saw that, but it's called the To-Do List Chock Full of Issues. And number one was school special education funding. Really, really good stuff, just understanding that now's the time to make sure that what districts are expending, they are actually reimbursed for. And this is coming from, Dan Steele, Head of Governmental Relations for WASA, right, Washington School Administrators. Second part was, again, school construction funding and bond election. And I love this because this is, I don't know if we can link this or cut and paste this and put this on our website, but I think our constituents would benefit by knowing this is the meat and potatoes of what we need. And so when we're putting forth a request and ask for levy money and bond money and understanding, you know, special education and why we're kind of jumping up and down on where the money should be for that. I think I put it in a very nice way, and it's just very ordinary language. And anyway, I don't know if that makes sense, but I really like the way they presented it in the Everett Herald. Second thing was today, Mr. Wright, I missed the big presentation, but he had his Yeah, he had his opening basically for where we're going in for the, as the legislature convenes. He says, a couple things I just noted in here. Our students' needs are profound and they preceded the pandemic. So that's really important to understand. We were going in not the best of ways. It was not, we had things going on prior to the pandemic, and then of course that exacerbated things. He also quotes, despite having one of the fastest growing economies in America, the state's investment in our public schools is on a trembling downward trend, once again, while the national average is increasing. I have put forward a package for legislative consideration that would support continued recovery and acceleration for our students and ensure our state is investing at least at the national average. So seeing Mr. Richter at our board meeting there in Spokane, I feel that's very much, I like to have that support from him. But then you hear the governor, and the governor's like, yeah, we're gonna maybe maintain 4.5 isn't even keeping pace with inflation. So I don't know what that means. I know from the conversation listening to Marissa Rathbone, who was our legislative person down there in Olympia, and yeah, they did not sound overly ambitious about what the governor is putting forward. So I have also put an email to Carl Carey. He is our rep in our legislative district on the school board side out of Granite Falls. And I said, I want to know how we gather our conversations from our district to then present to legislators. So I know when I talked to Dr. Sweeting, it was, we need to know where our stories are. And if you're meeting with people, then it makes sense to stay on Monday and do that. I don't know if that's lined up yet. I don't know what that looks like yet, but I'm in communication with Carl and finding out, what does that, and I say this to other folks here, I would need to know what those conversations are. If we need special ed funding, and I know this from my own kiddo, because she's a para over in Lakewood, and she is struggling because they're losing special ed teachers. They're filling it with substitutes, and the people that are there are not, fully capable of doing that job well. So you're not serving the students, which is what we're there for. And then the state mandates that we have to do these things, but they're not providing the money. So those kind of stories I think are extremely compelling, but I don't know what that looks like to tell. So I'm putting out the bat signal. So whatever that looks like, then I'm waiting to hear back from Carl on, do we talk to our legislators from the 10th? Do we talk to legislators across the state that support education? Like, I don't know what that looks like, because it's a couple things there. But I plan on going on that Sunday in February. And if I have someone to speak to on Monday, I'm happy to stay and do that. But whoever has stories or people, I don't know if Mark did that when he was here. If he physically went down to Olympia. Do you know if that happened? And he met with, I know he's done legislative calls with our legislators on the top level, but
There's ways to communicate besides the face-to-face, there's emails and there's those kinds of.
perfect. Okay.
And I will be sharing information about anytime we do meet with face-to-face, physically face-to-face, we do need to write down that time.
Okay.
Because there's some reporting requirements.
Okay. Oh, anyway, so I'm just, I'm kind of like, Brian that way, I mean, and Gina that way is too, is just, you want to be conservative. And I don't want to be a naysayer, but I also, I want to have hope, but I do feel like there's something more dramatic that has to happen in Olympia, if we're getting up the funding we need. And I honestly it doesn't make sense to me to live in the state with all I see the wealth and the resources and the technology. I feel like we're not paying it back. We're not giving these kids what they need. And it's just not right. I guess that myself thinking about that. So I will keep you posted.
Thank you, Sherry. Thank you for speaking from the heart. I think we all agree that there's a lot of work to be done, so. Next, Mariska, would you like to share any updates?
Any updates on my end? Well, nothing as of right now. I mean, right now for the choir, at least we're in the works of getting our Disneyland trip prepped and ready. We are working on our songs, chugging away at it. And drama is doing a great job of rehearsing for Seven Brides for Seven Brothers. Their dances are looking amazing. Costumes should be coming up soon, so that's all very exciting. And other than that, Happy New Year to all and wishing this is gonna be a good year. I think it's gonna be a good year, yes.
Thank you everyone for that. Mike Ray, are you still with us on Zoom? Would you like to share anything? Are you still there?
Yeah, still here. Nothing really to share.
Thank you. Michael Keenan, do you have anything?
Happy New Year to everybody. That's all I have. Thank you.
Oh, okay, I flip up that way too. Well, happy New Year to everybody. I think, one thing as we get back into it, I've been thinking about MLK, Martin Luther King Jr. Day coming up on Monday. That's kind of an important day for, I mean, it is an important day for us to remember and to honor. And one thing that we always do is reflect on our actions in my family and how we're giving back to the community and what work are we doing to further Dr. Martin Luther King's vision of economic, racial, and social justice. And it was one reason why it was really important for me to run for school board is how am I giving back to my community? How am I serving my community? And I read something from the National Museum of African American History and Culture talking about community. I've been thinking a lot about, you know, having a beloved community. How are you caring for your community and what does community mean? So I just wanted to read a little bit about it. It says, when we intentionally create a community for the purpose of a shared goal, it can deepen relationships, create a sense of belonging, and provide support for the health and well-being of all members of the community. Community is a gateway to better understand our own lives and the lives of others and creates an essential foundation for people working toward common goals. So I just wanted to, I guess, it's Board Appreciation Month, so thank you for helping to create this intentional community. Get it? I'm happy to be a part of it.
Sounds beautiful. Very, very wonderful. Thank you for sharing. I don't have much to share except for I got to go to the boys basketball game on Friday and we were awesome. It was a really intense game and we won barely. And got to go to the wrestling, do we call them meets, matches, tournament? I don't know what they call, but it was, we won by a whole lot. It was pretty awesome. And so excited to see what our kids are capable of and the growth and the positive opportunities that they have to learn and develop their talents and get stronger and better and smarter. And I know finals week is coming up and the end of the semester is coming up and there's a lot of stress out there and just hope everybody's doing their very best and learning and growing. Our next board meeting is our regular board meeting. We don't have a study session next week, but I double checked. Like we don't. It's very strange. Our next board meeting is our regular board meeting here at the district office on Monday, January 23rd at 6:00 p.m. And if there is nothing else, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn. Second.
It's been moved and seconded to adjourn. Madam Clerk.
Director Ray,
Hi.
Director Kelly, Director Kingman,
Bye.
President Levesque,
Aye.
Director Knapp.
Meeting is adjourned. Thank you. Ryan?